Hi, this is Marilia Huscia from Peace Matters, the IIP's podcast on contemporary geopolitics and international relations. Today we're talking about PeaceTech. What is PeaceTech? How can we use blockchain, artificial intelligence, and virtual reality technology in peace and mediation work? What can PeaceTech learn from CivicTech, and what is the purpose of the EU's AI Act? This episode is produced in cooperation with the Agency for Peacebuilding from Bologna and the Austrian Center for Peace, ACP. I'm talking to Bernardo Venturi, Head of Research and Policy at the Agency for Peacebuilding, and Nathan Coyle, Lead on PeaceTech at the ACP. Enjoy our discussion. So we're talking about PeaceTech today, and I gotta mention that we just held a workshop dealing with that topic with all possible kinds of people, tech people, international organizations people, general public, development organizations, and so on. And for me, it was a really, really insightful conversation because the topic is very new, very abstract to me, and actually it turned out to all of us it was the case. So I would just like to start with a very, very simple question, Nathan. What is PeaceTech? How do you define it? You're our expert on that.
So we're starting with a very loaded question, don't we? So PeaceTech is using technology to bring about peace and mediation. But the thing about PeaceTech, and as you rightly said today, we had a workshop on PeaceTech, and it was called, Is It a Buzzword? Basically, and obviously a lot of people are still not convinced about what PeaceTech is and skeptical, and in some reasons, myself too. And there are many definitions now to what PeaceTech is. And there is the overarching definition that I just mentioned, but it seems every different country has a different definition to what PeaceTech is. And again, we brought this up in the workshop today, but a lot of those definitions are quite corporate, from the States to the UK, where I'm from, to Colombia, to India. It's quite corporate. But here in Austria, we're trying to create a community building definition to what PeaceTech is, and we're doing it with the Open PeaceTech Hub, which I'm sure people will hear about more in the future. So when it comes to PeaceTech, there is room for people to get involved in the conversation and craft a definition to it, but it is pretty obvious PeaceTech using technology to bring peace and mediation.
All right. So straightforward. Okay. Well, if I think of peace or peace building, this idea or this concept in itself also includes lots of aspects, right? We can speak about humanitarian work, development work, but the core of it, I would say, or part of the core activity is mediation. And Bernardo, you've recently authored a paper dealing with the digital technologies used in mediation work, right? So can you maybe elaborate on PeaceTech from this perspective? What does it mean to use technology in mediation work?
Thanks Marilia, and thanks IIP for having me today. That's a great opportunity to discuss a complex topic that really needs to be clarified, further discussed, and probably to have a community around it, discussing and learning and improving how technology can contribute to peace. And as you said, mediation is part of this framework. It's more specific because peace mediation or international mediation, we can call peacemaking, is slightly different from peacebuilding per se. Peacebuilding is broader, it's involving a lot of stakeholders. It's a very long-term process. Peacemaking is more specific, and in peace mediation, we have to work with the bad guys, let's say. So we have to make agreements with the people that are fighting, with the people that are committing war crimes many times, and so on and so forth. So it's complex. And we can say that mediation is human-centered. So it's really having some people in the room, the right people, discussing and negotiating and trying to find a common ground. So the question could be how technology can really help on that if we just need real people in the room. And the answer is that technology can really help, for instance, to foster inclusivity. So we can really involve more stakeholders, and especially some categories that are usually marginalized, often women or people in the peripheries or stakeholders that for different reasons, in terms of logistics, in terms of security, cannot be in the room and cannot be directly involved in person.
All right, so as we know from some previous research, the more inclusive a peace agreement is, the longer it will potentially last. So it really does make sense to somehow use technology or any other means to include more people in these processes. All right, but okay, so great, we had some definition, we had some narrowing down of this definition, but in general it's still quite a broad area that we can speak about. It's quite, still very generally defined only. And I would like now to go with you into all those types of technology that can potentially be used for peace, but that are also very often associated with some negative sides that technology can have in our society. And I just learned a very cool word today, technophobe. Someone mentioned it at the workshop. Like, I think it's greatly characterizes like what many people feel today, especially in relation to artificial intelligence. Bernardo, maybe I can start with you on this one. So what can be the role of artificial intelligence in mediation, in peace building in general? How do you see that?
Yeah, I think you are right. There is a lot of skepticism about how technology can really contribute. There are different analysis and research going on, and we see that in development, peace, and even the humanitarian field, a lot of practitioners are really skeptical because they are doing the practical job in the field and say, we are actually here. We don't need that kind of AI and so on. And that's the first risk, to be too skeptical. And the other point, I think, is more related to what kind of technology, because often we think, to ChatGPT, to the big IT company, and that's it. So we see a lot of risk, but we don't see the potentiality. And what we discover also through our report is that technology should be really shaped for what we need. It's not just to take a software or an app and to use it. It's not about that, but it's really to shape the technology that you need, how to elaborate data, how to collect, and how to use according to your need. So for instance, just to make an example, a Finnish organization, CMI, the Marty Asari Foundation, was using AI in Sudan in terms of mediating the ongoing civil war. And basically they were collecting data amongst precise stakeholders, approximately 1,000 stakeholders. And they were bringing some analysis to the negotiating table. That was a way, to bring the needs of the population, the real population, to the negotiation table, and was extremely useful because often the parts involved in the conflict, they're bringing their own issues, and it's not clear what the people really want. So that was a way to have more people involved and to have a more inclusive process. But they really shape the tool and the way to use artificial intelligence, not just on the web, but precisely on some specific data.
All right. Nathan, what about virtual reality? Does this have some sort of implementation potential?
Well, again, I look at virtual reality as something that's very good at building empathy. It's also used as a tool for training, and from being a person that's worked in the field, and when we're talking about using virtual reality and how much impact it can actually have on peace builders, I'm still kind of looking into this field and seeing if there is actually as much impact as it can really believe to its potential. So with ACP, for example, we're working on a project called Skill Drill, and we are using virtual reality and mixed reality to create scenarios for people going into the field, such as map reading and radio, border control. Now, this is still a very young process in using VR in regards to going to the field. I can see a lot of value in using virtual reality for map reading and using the radio. I'm still kind of openly looking at is this actually much impact when we're talking about border controls and what it's like to be approached to ask for your papers and how to react to those. If I've got a hovering man in front of me, that's not the same as being in the field. So, but of course, there's massive potential. And again, I've mentioned empathy. There are loads of videos on YouTube you can watch with a €3 piece of cardboard, Google Cardboard, and looking at stories of what it's like to actually live in a refugee camp and to experience people's stories. That's where I see the full potential of using virtual reality. And again, when we're talking about accessibility, if a piece of technology isn't accessible, then there's no point to it. It's useless. But virtual reality is actually getting more accessible. Again, when we're talking about you can download templates off the internet and make your own virtual reality headsets with your phone. So again, if we can put real people in situations and building empathy from peace building themes, then I think there's loads of potential there.
Wow, really cool. Okay, another well-known tech thing that I hear about very often, blockchain. What about that? Can this have some application in PeaceTech as a PeaceTech tool?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, there are some examples that are really, really useful to certify, the contribution of some specific group of people, stakeholder, and so on. Because, as we know, one of the important things is to guarantee, especially mediation, that is often extremely confidential. So to have a safe space, and blockchain can help about that. There are some concerns also related to environmental issues, but in the last years there are some improvements. So I think it's a field that should be more explored in the near future.
Yeah. Okay. One more thing is open data. But I think this one has been there already for longer. So I at least got used already to the idea that you can use and the data and the crowdsource and somehow use all these tools to basically to disseminate information as well. Nathan, you actually just authored a book that has been published today, I think.
It has, yeah.
Yeah, on that. So, and as far as I understand, you're saying that a lot of stuff that is now used as PeaceTech has come from CivicTech, and your book is exactly on CivicTech. So can you maybe, and on open data, right? So can you maybe elaborate on that? What's the connection? What are the differences between those fields, and anything what you find interesting in this context?
Yeah, cool. And cheers for the plug.
Yeah.
So the book is called Open Data for Everybody, Using Open Data for Social Change. And this was reflection on my career of working in civic technology. So I'm fairly new to peace technology. And I've worked in many conflict zones, we would say, from Palestine to Kosovo to Colombia, and I was working in PeaceTech without knowing I was working in PeaceTech. And there are some similarities because the book looks at how we can make open data more understandable and accessible to third sector organisations. So we used to do a lot of work with central governments and help them to make more inclusive policy, and then try to convince third sector organisations to use open data for social good, so funding, capacity building, etc., etc. So now working with peacebuilding organisations, there are actually loads of similarities between third sector organisations and the peacebuilding organisations because they have a issue with accessibility when it comes to data. So they don't understand it, they don't think it's for them, so why would they seek it out? And so there's a real opportunity now to train and educate people on how they can use open data for social good. As you said, I come from a civic technology background, and what civic technology is amazing at doing is activating people. So there are some amazing organisations out there. I will mention the Open Knowledge Foundation, who are fantastic, and especially their chapter in Germany. So they have Code for Deutschland, and basically these are volunteers who will meet up in bars and coffee shops across Germany, and they will have a conversation about their local city, what they want to change, what they think doesn't work, and how they can go about it. And so they come together and they build websites, apps, campaigns, whatever. And these are just run-of-the-mill community activists and social tech activists. Now, what I think we can really learn from PeaceTech is that mentality. We talked about community building before, and unless you really activate normal people on the ground, in this case peace builders and field workers, and get them to have a conversation about what their needs are and how we can activate them, then it's like, again, the technology is pointless. So it's really, really important that now we start to use that mentality to peace technology. And why wouldn't we be able to activate social tech activists and peace builders to come together to make peace and concentrate on peace? If they do it for like parking problems in their city, now I think like peace is a lot more important than that. So there's a lot to learn from civic technology. I also wrote an article on what we can learn from PeaceTech. So if you just Google open government partnership, civic technology and peace technology, you will read the article. So.
All right, great. I really like this point about people gathering in cities and solving their problems, but I think when you're speaking about this, you mainly mean the context of Europe or maybe some other countries with really great, I don't know, internet coverage and otherwise very much digitally advanced places. But if we are speaking about conflict zones, this is very often not the case. And Bernardo, I remember you also mentioned in the paper that there is this issue of digital divide of different societies. So what are we going to do with that, and how can maybe PeaceTech solve that or address this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a central point also of our report. The important point here is really like in real lives, that we work on inclusivity and we work to include different, not just stakeholders, but even marginalized groups. And that is an issue in peace mediation in general. We have seen the United Nations Security Council resolution on women, peace and security, the 1325, that is very well known. This is really boosting for more women's participation in peace processes. And till today, I mean, women are really marginalized in several peace processes. The high-level tables in particular, I mean, it's very limited participation and very limited female participation and signatories. So on this, in this aspect, I think technology should support more inclusiveness and more participation, and not to create another barrier, another divide. So it's really important to have a technology that is accessible, that can support full participation of different stakeholders. So on this extent, we figure out that it's very important to have a context analysis. Technology is not the same in every place. Technology is related to the use that we make of it, but even the environment where it's used. I mean, the same, smartphone can be very useful to support women's participation in a determined society, where the women are really free to use the smartphone, or can be a constraint if some women, they are controlled by their husband or by their chiefs and so on. So we really need good context analysis and also related to the use of technology. And after that, to apply technologies that can include different groups. So not just to have a top-down use of whatsoever technology, but try really to use technology as a way to include minorities, women, more youth, and so on.
Right. Yeah, okay. So this all sounds great and rosy. And now let me get into hard geopolitics, let's put it this way. What I often hear about the EU in general is that it lags behind in technology and technological development, that we often speak about China, the United States. The most tech companies are actually located in the US. I don't know, like the EU ranks like relatively low on the list. And I was doing some research. Apparently the EU invests just 1/5 in research on tech of what the US invests in it, and just half of what China invests in it. So there is really some big gap, yeah? And then again, we are getting in this geopolitical logic of competing, like who should be first, who should be, like faster and stronger and so on. And all those ideas of human rights and peace and, technology for good tend to somehow be lost in this process, right? So, but maybe, like, to be maybe a bit more positive about it at least, last year the EU adopted an Artificial Intelligence Act. And my question to you, Nathan, maybe, does it change anything? What is it about? You can just go crazy.
So, the other day, right here in Vienna, I was at an event, and we were talking about AI. And there is a lot of people who are terrified of AI, and a lot of people who look at AI and think there is loads of potential. And one of the questions was, are we too late with AI? Has the horse bolted, as they say? Can we bring this back and can we control it? And they asked me that question, and I replied, well, not really, no. The horse has bolted, because if you look at OpenAI, for example, and they released their APIs, so developers could make things with AI, and I have made loads of ridiculously stupid things with AI. It's out there. AI is growing. It's not going to be able to be controlled. But what the European Union have released recently, and they're still, I think, fleshing out a lot of it, how it's going to be pushed out there, is the AI EU Act. Now, I think that is actually quite an important bit of policy and legislation, because if you look at GDPR, which is the data compliance strategy of the EU, and we would, as you were just saying, if the EU lags behind a lot of countries in the world, but boy, do they have a lot of power. So the GDPR Act came about as from the Cambridge Analytica scandal, Facebook, and how people were using people's data. And it comes to a point where GDPR can fine people 10% of their profits. And people now take data compliance very, very seriously. Facebook has been fined through the nose. Google has been fined excessively. No one's really been safe from this. So as AI grows, people are going to start to use it more. If you're looking at Apple, they're now going to integrate ChatGPT into their phone networks. AI is going to be forced on us more and more and more. We're not going to get away with it. But with something, if you learn from the GDPR policy and how people took it deadly serious because of these inherent massive fines, I think the EU Act is actually a really positive look on regulation. And because of the roadmap of the success of GDPR, I think the only thing we can really do is regulate it in that way, because people are going to do horribly nasty things with AI, because people do that with data anyway. And when we're talking about open data or what kind of data is inherently biased, it's racially biased, it's gender biased. There's the good and the bad, and that ain't going to go away.
Right. I think it was also mentioned during the workshop that values matter for actually how you source the data, basically, and this also makes difference between different actors who use the data. So, yeah.
Indeed. I mean, it's ethically how we use data. The world isn't ethical.
Yeah.
We do what we do in our spaces, and we try to make a difference. But again, the world isn't ethical, and data just reflects human beings. But back to regulation, it's a really hard thing to regulate, but I do think the AI Act is a step in the right direction. And because of when you look at AI uses data anyway, and if you look at how the EU regulates data to how America does, so America has a very federal outlook on data. So and industrial, so it's healthcare data, and everyone regulates it themselves. It's a bit of a wild west, literally, when it comes to data. But we can say what we want about the EU and its issues and whatever. But when it comes to regulation of digital policy, I think they're some of the best in the world, and we're quite lucky to live in the European Union and have that kind of regulation, because even GDPR, it far outweighs European borders. Everyone looks at GDPR as the benchmark. So let's hope this AI Act is as influential. And there is a paper I'm working on at the moment on the peacebuilding implications of the AI Act. So it would be interesting to see how that's shared and the conversation we have from that.
Right, great. That's a very nice outlook. And I'm happy to hear from an Englishman that it's great to live in the European Union.
Yeah. With some sort for summer visa, but there we go.
Yeah.
Another talk for another time. Let's not get negative.
Right. Bernardo, what would your maybe wish or recommendation be to any actors that somehow deal with PeaceTech, consider including it into their work? What is important?
Yeah, I mean, in our report, we really try to address some recommendation or really trajectories for the way forward. And I think that the very first point is about ethical issues. And when we think about inclusion and exclusion, we know when that is easy to make, I mean, to create new mechanism of exclusion. So I think, first of all, it's very important to have good analysis and understand what can be the mechanism of exclusion with the new and old digital technology. And the second point is about what I would call do no harm, so the conflict sensitivity, that when we create a mechanism of in a peace process, we really try not to harm, really try not to have negative effects. It sounds weird because, I mean, we are peace builder, we are mediators, but at the same time, even those kind of factors can create more cleavages and more divisions and so on. The third point is about the gender lenses. Because, I mean, as Nathan just said, I mean, data and data collection is not neutral, right? So it's important also to be aware of our bias. And I think in particular on gender, it's really important not just to foster gender inclusion in broader terms or people sitting in a room, but to think all the different levels and mechanisms, also in terms of data collection, and so on. I would like also to recommend to go beyond the skepticism, to overcome the skepticism that we have for the new technologies and try to be optimistic, probably, but also to be open-minded to explore. There could be mistakes, there could be constraint and limitation in the future, but it's important that different partners, stakeholders, and very different ones from the IT communities, the peace builder, think tankers, and so on, really gather, connect, and explore honestly, transparently, and sharing what they learn. So open data, but even, I mean, through reports. So this kind of sharing is really important. We have seen today to the event, I mean, different stakeholders sitting down, sharing, discussing, learning together, acquiring some lesson learned, and probably, hopefully, implementing, experimenting in the future.
Right, so community building. Going
Absolutely.
Back to your plan for Austria, as I understand, Nathan, right?
Indeed. I think when we were talking today, there was a real consensus in the room to make, you know, PeaceTech really human-centric, you know, as you said yourself. And from the debate in the room, it seemed like everyone agreed with that. And I think one of the things that we really must avoid is this corporateness of peace technology, because the people using it aren't corporate, never will be corporate. And again, if it's accessible, then literally there's no point to it whatsoever. So.
Cool. Thank you so much for this very interesting discussion.
Thank you.
Kurz und knackig, as they say in Austria. I hope you enjoy our discussion. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and all other social media, and see you next time.